Good? All right. If everybody could take their seats, we're going to begin the program. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. I am Christopher Januzzi, ECS Executive Director and CEO, and it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you, whether you're on site here in wonderful Atlanta or you're joining us via video stream from somewhere else in the world, to this, the 242nd ECS meeting. Being in Atlanta again is sort of a homecoming for ECS, being that this was the last place we hosted an in-person meeting prior to our 2.5-year hiatus due to COVID-19. And so I feel like this is a huge step forward in moving beyond the challenges of the recent past and toward what I believe will be, thanks in no small part to the ECS community, a much brighter future for us all. At this meeting, we will carry forward ECS's legacy of outstanding technical content. We have 48 symposia with over 2,600 abstracts, all coming from 65 countries around the globe. And it's clear that if your interests are in the fields of electrochemistry and solid-state science, well, you will find what you are looking for this week here in Atlanta. We kicked off the meeting yesterday with a lovely reception for ECS members. This is a special event that we added after coming back from the shutdown as a way to celebrate our return to in-person meetings. But of course, we also want to welcome all those who've not yet had a chance to become ECS members. We hope you do. And we hope to see you at our next members-only event, which will be at the spring meeting in Boston. But in the meantime, please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you make the most of your meeting experience while you're here with us in Atlanta today. You know, ECS is incredibly fortunate to have a diverse array of meeting sponsors, shown here on the screen, who help bring these events to you. And we are very grateful for our many symposia sponsors. It is only through their support that we can offer the robust technical program and enriching special events that you'll find at this meeting. We'd like to give a warm welcome as well to our institutional members, shown here, who support ECS through their annual organization memberships. And it would simply be impossible to produce these meetings without ECS's divisions and sections. They are a vital source of support for our meetings. And so on behalf of all of our divisions, our sections, and our many sponsors, I would like to wish you all the very best this week in Atlanta, and I will ask you to join me in welcoming ECS President Turgut Gur to the podium. Mr. President.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you in this beautiful Atlanta. I cannot tell you how excited and honored I am to officially open the conference and be able to welcome you to this very important gathering. I'm grateful that we are here together having our second in-person meeting, because I believe that we need to recognize the unprecedented global challenges that we are facing. Climate change, of course, tops the list of greatest concerns and is strongly linked to energy production and the use of fossil fuels. We know energy impacts almost everything from food to water production, to the environment, to climate change, and to even shifts in population, disrupting all aspects of life. Recent geopolitical conflicts and aggression underscored the vulnerability of our energy systems, as well as the global goods and food supply chains. However, despite these challenges, we stay hopeful. I stay hopeful, as our efforts in advancing the science and technology to innovate sustainable solutions to these difficult problems we needed more than ever. I say that because I know, as president and someone who has been a proud member of the society for nearly 50 years, that the ECS community represents the finest and the best minds in the electrochemical and solid-state sciences. And I'm confident that together we will advance the cause of science and technology for the betterment of humanity. Nowhere is this more evident than in our ongoing efforts to combat and mitigate climate change. and nowhere can ECS have a greater impact in both the fundamental and technology aspects of our mission. From fuel cells, batteries, and supercapacitors for energy conversion and storage, to sensors, electronics, and optoelectronics, to electrochemical industrial processes such as hydrogen production, electrosynthesis, CO2 utilization and conversion, and water remediation, the work of all 13 divisions of ECS is central to collectively addressing this most critical problem. And so with the approval of ECS Executive Committee and on behalf of the Society, I'm pleased to announce our newly approved position statement on climate change that you can find on our website. With this statement, ECS pledges to advocate for integrating science in the implementation of effective strategies and sustainable solutions to combat climate change. Yes, there is still much work to be done. Thankfully, the technical program we have developed will advance that work. Let us honor our members for their contributions and to celebrate. Therefore, I would like to move on to the ECS Awards and Recognition Ceremony program now. And because this is only our second in-person meeting in 3 years, we have a bit of a catching up to do. And so in addition to this year's awardees, we will also be joined by previous winners who have not yet been publicly recognized for their outstanding achievements. First, I would like to congratulate our division and section award winners, whom you will find listed both online and in the meeting program. Please make a point to attend their sessions where you can experience firsthand why they were being recognized by their peers for their technical contributions. Our first award is the Leadership Circle Award, which recognizes and thanks our institutional partners. The award is granted in the year a member institution reaches a significant anniversary milestone. Today, we recognize the Duracell Corporation for their 65 years of institutional membership and dedication to ECS. Here to receive the award is Dan Gibbons, Principal Engineer and Research Fellow at Duracell. Dan? Thank you very much, Dan, and to Duracell for their continued support and engagement in ECS. Next, we will present the Young Author Awards to recognize the best papers published in the Journal of the Electrochemical Society and the Journal of Solid State Science and Technology by young authors or co-authors in the preceding volume year. With us today are two of the 2021 winners of the Norman Hackerman Young Author Award, Philip Menman and Simon Burkhart from Justus Liebig Universität Gießen Institute of Physical Chemistry for their paper published in the Journal of the Electrochemical Society, quantifying the impact of charge transport bottlenecks in composite cathodes of all solid-state batteries. Congratulations. Simon? Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations to Philip and Simon. Also, we have with us the 2021 winner of the Bruce Steele and Andy Grove Award for Outstanding Work, published by a young author in JSS. Today, we recognize Franz Seltman from the Fraunhofer Institute for his paper, Low-Temperature Parylene-Based Adhesive Bonding Technology for 150 and 200 millimeter wafers for fully biocompatible and highly reliable microsystems. Franz? Congratulations, Franz. And now I would like to ask ECS Senior Vice President Jerry Botte to come to the stage to recognize our next recipients. Jerry?
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Turgut. The 13 divisions of the Electrochemical Society ensure in-depth coverage of the Society's broad technical domain. Over the course of their 2-year terms, division chairs not only oversee all affairs of their respective divisions, they provide stewardship at the Society level by serving in our board of directors. As part of the board, these chairs help to shape the future of our organization, and so we are truly indebted to their service. Please join me in recognizing the following past division chairs. Stanko Brankovic, Electrodeposition Division Chair, 2017-2019. We're going to name several, so we're going to hold a recognition at the end. So, Masayuki Itawaki, Corrosion Division Chair, 2018-2020. Peter Vanisek, Physical Analytical Electrochemistry Division, 2019-2021. Philip Burkhart, Electrodeposition Division Chair, 2019-2021. And Jaco Burkhart, Luminescence and Display Materials Division Chair, 2019-2021. Please join me in a round of applause. And now we will recognize 2 members who have served in the executive leadership of the Electrochemical Society through their work as society officers. The first is Jessie Bizarre, ECS Treasurer 2018-2022, for her 4 years of truly inspired stewardship of ECS finances. And we would like to especially recognize the 2021-2022 ECS President, Eric Washman, for his visionary leadership, helping the Electrochemical Society emerge from the COVID-19 shutdown and on the better days ahead. Jessie and Eric. Well, Jessie and Eric, thank you for your service and your dedication. Now, the distinction of Fellow of the Electrochemical Society was established to recognize advanced individual technological contributions in the field of electrochemical science and solid-state science and technology, as well as active membership and involvement in the affairs of the Electrochemical Society. As Turgut mentioned, we're still playing catch-up with our public recognitions, and so we are pleased today to be joined by fellows spanning the previous 3 years' classes. From the 2020 class of ECS Fellows, please welcome Rodney Burkhart for seminal contributions to the understanding of polymer electrolyte fuel cell durability. Andrew Heering for creative contributions to the science and technology of polymer electrolyte membranes. Stefano Passerini, in recognition of his outstanding contribution to the field of electrochemical energy storage. Venkataraman Tangadure, for major contributions to the development of highly conductive solid electrolytes. Jay Xiao for her scientific and technical contributions in emerging electrochemical energy storage. And Gleb Yushin for his development and mass commercialization of low surface area size preserving nanocomposites. Please join me in congratulating members of the 2020 class of ECS Fellows. All right. And now, we will honor members of the 2021 class of ECS Fellows. Anja Boysen, for her groundbreaking, impactful, and pioneering contributions to the field of nanomechanical sensors, and for being a role model who inspires women around the world. Stanko Brankovic, for fundamental contributions to electrochemical material science. Douglas Hansen, in recognition of distinguished contributions to the advancement of corrosion, biochemical and electrochemical science and engineering. And Xiaodong Xu, for outstanding scientific and technological contributions to fuel cells, electrolyzers, and batteries, and his dedicated service to the society. Please join me in congratulating the class of 2021 fellows. Okay, is she here? Yeah. Okay. All right. And now we will recognize members of the 2022 class of ECS Fellows. Mitchell Arment, in recognition of his pioneering and outstanding contribution to the field of electrochemical energy storage. This person next, I appreciate significantly because I learned computational chemistry from her. Perla Valbuena, for contributions to the understanding of electron and ion transport mechanisms driven the formation of solid electrolyte interfaces. Gerbrand Cedar, for pioneering work on designing and understanding battery materials using first computational modeling. Wilson Xu, for his contributions to fundamental understanding of 3D electrochemical and transport processes. Andrew Hoff, in recognition of contributions to the advancement of science and technology in the areas of solid-state electronics and bioengineering. Gao Liu, for contributions to the fundamental understanding of the functions of the polymer binder in composite electrodes. Brett Locke, for outstanding contributions to the research and development of non-aqueous electrolytes for electrochemical storage devices. Janine Mauserol, for the development of next-generation electroanalytical tools for biological and corrosion research. Noam Min, for his impactful contributions to materials engineering, designs, manufacturing, processes, and systems. Deborah Myers, for impactful and sustained contributions to electrochemistry and electrocatalysis. Jaggi Nanda, for pioneering work on solid-state batteries, lithium-ion batteries, flow batteries, and service to the society. James Noel, for his impactful and sustained contributions in the areas of materials and corrosion science. Elizabeth Polaha Murphy, for her seminal contributions in understanding the electrodeposition processes of alloy and composite materials. B.J. Ramani, for fundamental and applied research contributions at the interface of electrochemical energy conversion and storage and material science. And Yasushiro Shimizu, for his groundbreaking, impactful, and pioneering contributions to the field of semiconductor gas sensors. To the members of the 2020, 2021, and 2022 classes, it is the Society's honor to welcome you as Fellows of the Electrochemical Society. Congratulations all.
Thank you, Jerry, and congratulations again to all our fellows. The next award is the 2022-23 ECS Toyota Young Investigator Fellowship. Each investigator fellow received a one-year, $50,000 grant to pursue research in batteries, fuel cells, and hydrogen, and future sustainable technologies. With this year's recipient, we celebrate that the ECS Toyota partnership has now provided over $1.4 million to support young professionals and scholars. Thank you, and thank you to Toyota. Now, please join me in congratulating this year's 4 ECS Toyota Young Investigator Fellows. Batar Galant from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Yoan Liu, Johns Hopkins University, Jacob Spendolo, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and William Tarpe from Stanford University. Be sure to join us for the 244th ECS meeting in Gothenburg, Sweden, next October, where these young investigators will present their groundbreaking research. Please note, application submission for next year's Young Investigator Award Fellowship opens this November and closes on January 31st, 2023. Moving on to Charles Tobias Young Investigator Award, which was established in 2003 to recognize outstanding scientific and/or engineering work in fundamental and applied electrochemistry or solid-state science and technology by a young scientist or engineer. Charles Tobias played a seminal role in electrochemical engineering. His example, counsel, advice, and encouragement impacted countless young minds, encouraging them to seek excellence in teaching, research, professional contributions to basic and interdisciplinary science and engineering. We have 2 winners we are recognizing today. First is the 2020 Charles Tobias Award winner, Brian McCloskey from the University of California, Berkeley, for quantitative insights in oxygen activity and degradation mechanisms in high-energy batteries. Professor McCloskey gave his award talk, Understanding Reactivity at Electrode-Electrolyte Interfaces in Lithium, Oxygen, and Lithium-ion Batteries at the Digital Prime meeting back in October 2020. Congratulations, Brian. The 2022's recipient of the Charles Tobias Young Investigator Award is Fikile Burkhart from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for pioneering advances in understanding and controlling the fundamental processes that govern performance, cost, and lifetime of the next generation of flow electrochemical systems for energy storage and conversion. Please be sure to attend Professor Burkhart's award talk, Advancing Porous Electrolytes for Electrochemical Systems, taking place live on Wednesday at 5:20 p.m. in room 224. Congratulations, Fikile. The next society award, the Palladium Award, was established in 1950 for distinguished contributions to the field of electrochemical or corrosion science. The 2021 winner of the Palladium Award is Gerald Frankel of The Ohio State University for sustained and seminal contributions in corrosion science. Professor Frankel presented his talk, Pitting Corrosion Retrospective, at the Digital 240th ECS meeting in October 2021. Congratulations, Jerry. We're honoring two winners of our next award, Edward G. Atchison Award, which was established back in 1928 to recognize distinguished contributions to the advancement of any of the objects, purposes, or activities of the Electrochemical Society. Edward Goodrich Atchison was an American chemist, the sixth president of the Electrochemical Society, an inventor of the Atchison process, which is still used today to make silicon carbide, and later a manufacturer of carborundum and graphite. Atchison worked with Thomas Edison and experimented on making conducting carbon to be used in electric light bulbs. The 2020 winner of the Atchison Award is Esther Takuchi of the Stony Brook University for inventive contributions to the lithium silver vanadium oxide battery and enabling electrochemical technology discovery, which saved millions of human lives. Professor Takuchi presented her award talk, Investigation of Batteries over Multiple Length and Time Scales, at the 240th ECS meeting in October 2021. Congratulations, Esther. The 2022 winner of the Edward G. Atchison Award is Yu Ko of University of Texas A&M for exceptional contributions to solid-state science and technology and for outstanding service to the Electrochemical Society. Professor Ko delivered his award talk, Exploration of Amorphous Thin Film Electronics, earlier today. And if you missed it, you will be able to view a replay of the talk in the online meeting program. Congratulations again to all today's award recipients and Service Recognition honorees. Thank you for your contributions to this society and science. This concludes the ECS Awards and Recognition Ceremony, and it's time to move on to the ECS Plenary Lecture. Sorry about that. There was a mishap in the text over here. Sorry about that. It was 3 years ago, just before the last ECS meeting held in this building in Atlanta, the world changed for today's speaker when he, along with his colleagues Sean Goodenough and Akira Yoshino, learned that they were awarded the 2019 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the development of lithium-ion batteries. And how fortunate we were that just a few days later, he would be here with us in Atlanta to celebrate this incredible news. A lot has happened in the world since then, and most of it serves to underscore just how critical the work of our next speaker is today and will be for the foreseeable future and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Nobel laureate and distinguished professor of chemistry from the University of Binghamton of the State University of New York, Professor Sam Whittingham, and his talk, the critical role of energy storage in the electric economy and overcoming climate change. Stan?
Thank you very much, Turgid. Many of you may not be aware I've known Turgid for more than half a century. He was at Stanford the same time as I was, as was his wife. I'd like to congratulate the two young Norman Hackerman Award winners, because 50 years ago at this meeting that I got the same award. So what I want to really talk about is the role of energy storage and really how it can affect climate change. I'm not going to have too many chemistry equations on there, so don't worry about that. There may be a few, some of you may say, politically sensitive comments, but we'll see how we go, okay? So I want to thank DOE, first of all. They've supported my research now since early 1990s. Without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think I just show you a few pictures here. This is what climate change is all about. This is all within the last 12 months. It's not just America, it's throughout the world. I've got pictures here from South America, Europe, US, and not just intense damage in a short period of time, but if you look at the one from Banff National Park, the Victoria Glacier, we used to have meetings there every other year, and that glacier has essentially disappeared right now. So we've had a number of disruptions in our lives in the last few decades. The first one, I think, was a good one, and that's when lithium-ion batteries, with the help from Samsung and Apple, gave us instant communications. It changed all our lives. Some people say not necessarily for the good, but every one of you has a lithium battery, and every one of you knows immediately what's happening back in your home and around the world. That really disrupted things. Then we had the bad disruption 3 years ago when COVID came along and met us. Now we have this third disruption, which is the climate change, and it's my opinion, we're going to have to adapt to it. We can't necessarily roll it back, but we maybe can control what's going to happen in the future. We have to do with clearly less fossil fuels, as Turgid already mentioned. We need cleaner electrical energy, and I think most New Yorkers are very proud of the fact there's not a single kilowatt hour of energy generated by coal in New York State anymore. That's not to say we don't have dirty fuels. So in the town where my wife teaches, they had a large oil spillage of dirty crude that was being burnt, and it was corrosion. The tanks were, I don't know, 50, 60 years old, and they were corroding all over the place. Other thing in our own town in Binghamton, in about 2010, AES put a small storage facility in there. Within 1 month of that going in, they closed the coal power plant in Binghamton down. 5 years later, after a big flood we had and it got regenerated, AES decided they can make more money in Ohio, and they hauled it off to Ohio. And that's one reason why lithium-ion batteries are successful. They're portable and they're fixed. So the utility decides we need it for 3 years, say in the substation, they can put it 3 years and they can take it away and move it somewhere else almost straight away. We all know with renewable energy, most of it is solar and wind. That happens when it feels like it, not under our control. So we need storage there. And the easiest way of doing storage is lithium batteries, and I'll show you something else in a moment, but lithium batteries are extremely flexible. Beyond grid storage, clearly transportation is a major source of CO2, and I think you're going to see most major cities are going to ban internal combustion engines in the city centers. Europe is clearly ahead of us at the moment, but I think you're going to find places like San Francisco, New York, you're not going to drive your petroleum vehicle anymore. And I expect for the younger folks in the audience here, you will not probably own a car in, say, 10, 20 years. All the cars will be, you'll get them by pushing a button on your iPhone. The car will come to you, pick you up, drop you off, and then it will go to the next passenger. You will not need a garage. You will not have to worry about charging or anything, okay? And what we're also going to see, and I think Jeff Dion has been the champion of this, your cars and vehicles are going to be hooked to the grid at all times when they're not actually moving. So you have a better, more stable grid, and if you lose power in your house, your car will keep your house going. So by far the largest source of stored energy in the United States and probably most parts of the world is pumped hydro. There are a number of these in New York State, and I show you just one here. The biggest change in the last 10 years is these super efficient electrical pumps. So the round-trip efficiency is over 73% now. And the real issue here, though, there are not many new sites. So they're restricted, so that's why we really have to go into batteries. And batteries, you know, you can go from milliwatts to megawatts, and as California has shown, we can go to gigawatts. And the big advantage of batteries is they're instant switch on and switch off. A pumped hydro takes 3 to 5 minutes to get going. So I have to thank an earlier employer of mine, that was Esso, now ExxonMobil. They had the wisdom to get into renewable energy, into clean energy. Back in the early 1970s, they had a whole lot of folks, a lot of them from Stanford. Bell Labs did the same thing at that time. And they were the largest manufacturer of solar photovoltaic cells in the United States. They had fuel cell program, battery program, you name it, they had it, including experts on climate change, which some people may deny it now, but they are the real experts. And we ask now, had Exxon stayed with renewable energy, would the world be different? And I think the answer is yes, but they know. Oil prices went down and they got out of the business. On the right-hand side there, and let me see if this will work. You can see here, this is one of the original batteries we built. This is a paperweight we gave away to companies who wanted to buy the batteries. This particular one is still in my office at home. It's still working. So a good lithium-ion battery will last forever, and I should say the anode in this is a lithium-aluminum alloy and titanium disulfide. At the bottom down here is a EV battery they built and took to Chicago for the EV show back in 1977. Those of you who are not old enough, this country had a very large EV program in the 1970s. But early 80s, Exxon got out of the business. The Department of Energy said, if Exxon's not doing it, we're not doing it either. So they got out of the business instead of trying to solve the really big problems. And this is a copy of the original patent we got back in 1973 when it started. So where are we now? Those were the little gadgets we had, and Exxon's interest was electric vehicles. This shows you a suite of electric vehicles from the little two-seater to the 16-wheelers, and these are from Washington State, from Packard's test facility there. Raymond, all-electric trucks, the BAE buses, and a number of cars. This is where we are today. The whole field is moving forward, and it would move forward much, much faster if we didn't have supply chain issues. So where do we stand? This is not predictions. These are, I think, facts. You can extrapolate if you want yourselves, but I think right now, talking to all the large automakers, Ford, GM, Tesla, they could sell 2 or 3 times as many cars, electric vehicles, if they could make them in the plants. I've talked about grid storage. Clearly, if we have solar, we've got to store it, and I show you here the facility in Moss Landing, California. This is 1.6 gigawatt hours. It stores solar energy in the middle of the day and then disperses it the rest of the day. This facility is not big enough. They've got the okay to go to 6 gigawatt hours. Right now, solar energy at certain times of the month it's worth nothing in California. They generate too much and they can't store it. At the top, I show you a wind facility in West Virginia. This one's about 8 to 10 years old. Stores the energy, smooths the energy, and shifts it up to about 6 hours. An area you may not be familiar with, in the International Space Station at the end of 2019, when we were in Stockholm, they were in the middle of converting and taking out all the nickel metal hydride batteries and putting lithium-ion batteries on the space station. And in fact, on the outside of the space station, they get the electricity from solar energy. And the two astronauts here, one from the US and one from Italy, were very happy. The batteries weigh half as much, they store twice as much energy, and they last twice as long. So they expect these batteries to outlast the space station. So just in case there's anybody in the audience that doesn't know what a lithium-ion battery is, I want to just emphasize a few points because this will come up in a moment. So here we have the anode. This is typically lithium, ideally. Then we have the cathode, and the lithium goes from the anode to the cathode. Here are the sequence of events over the years. So SO or Exxon started with pure lithium. We realized dendrite problems, went to lithium aluminum. At this point, Exxon dropped out of the game, and they licensed the technology to Eveready, who then worked with Sony in Japan on a joint team. Today, essentially all the all the batteries use graphitic carbon. This is good and bad. It works very well, but it needs 70 grams of carbon to store 7 grams of lithium, and it takes up half the volume of the cell. So we have challenges there. So the big effort now is really to go on to tin or silicon, where we can get maybe 4 lithiums per tin or silicon. But there's a lot of folks in this audience who know that these materials expand 300%, and therefore they tend to degrade very fast. So there's a lot of research going on now to try to make, in particular, silicon to work. But a really big push going on, and there's lots of talks at this meeting, is let's go back to pure lithium and try to make pure lithium work, whether with a liquid electrolyte or a solid one. On the cathode side, there's been very few materials used. If you think of this is 50 years old as of this month, when the first lithium-ion battery was made in September of 1972. Okay. Layered material, lithium titanium disulfide. Great material, metallic conductor, gets the electrons and the ions in and out, but low voltage. John Goodenough then switched to another layer material, lithium cobalt oxide. Cobalt's expensive, so this merged into a mixed nickel metal cobalt material, what we call NMC or NCA. That's the major material used today in most batteries in this country. John then found out that the olivine, LiFePO4, was very reversible with lithium. And that's a low-cost version, which is the predominant cathode used, say, in China, and Tesla uses it for their vehicles they export from China to Europe. They are also planning to use it in the US for their lower-cost vehicles, and I think you're going to find a lot of folks, the auto companies, going to switch to that because you got rid of the cobalt and you got rid of the nickel. And it should be used in grid storage, but it's not used very much. And I think it's going to go back in there just because of cost issues. The problem with the lithium iron phosphate, you've got the big phosphate group, and therefore the volumetric and gravimetric energy density is low. So to solve that, you need to put 2 lithium ions in, and we're doing research on lithium vanadium phosphate. Vanadium has the advantage, you can go from vanadium 5 to vanadium 3, and I'll show you a slide or two on that a little later. So we still get the comments. You folks got the Nobel Prize in 2019. That means all the research is finished. You don't need to do any more. You can see from these numbers, look at the numbers inside that red oval. That's the percentage of the theoretical energy density you get in commercial batteries today. And if you're talking about vehicles or your cell phones, your watches, volumetric energy density is more important than the weight one. And you see that varies from 11%, at the best case it's 25%. So there's a huge opportunity to still improve this. The major issue there is the graphitic anode. Basically that carbon has to go. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. And what we also have to do is use more of the lithium that's in the cathode materials. We've got to use it all. And for the basic scientists, we need these materials. The higher the voltage, the worse the electronic behavior. So we need to get materials that have a higher electronic conductivity and a higher lithium mobility so we can make thicker and thicker electrodes. So we're working on this and a lot of others, and I'll show you one or two slides in a moment. And this is work of my colleague who just became a fellow of the society. This is Jay's work, and Jay's going to be joining me. She's going to grill me on the stage here a little later on. So Turgid worked with me in California at Stanford. Jay was one of my PhD students a little while ago. So what she has managed to do in this Battery 500 project, I don't need to go through the details of this. You can see 5 years ago, in 2017, we barely got 50 cycles out of these materials. And these materials use a pure lithium metal anode. They use an ether-based electrolyte. Ether-based electrolytes plate out lithium much better than carbonate ones. So we went from 300 watt-hours per kilogram in 2017, 50 cycles. As of last year, we're well over 600 cycles at 350. So it is possible to have lithium metal-based batteries that will cycle and live a long time. And I should mention these materials all have this meatball morphology, and this is because they pack well, but it also has some problems because the little crystallites expand differently in the different dimensions, so they tend to crack and the meatballs slowly fall apart. So one of the challenges if we want still higher energy densities, and there's no one here who doesn't want higher energy densities, we want more energy at less cost and we want them to be safer. If you want higher energy density, you've got to put more nickel in your material, in your batteries. You take out the cobalt, you want to do that anyway, because the cobalt comes from Congo, there's a lot of child labor issues there, and it's very expensive. But the challenge with putting more nickel in there, these materials become less and less stable. So all these layered oxides have, when they're charged, the transition metals are in the +4 state, which is a metastable state, and they would like to eject oxygen. The more nickel in there, the more drive there is to eject the oxygen. And I just show you here, this is the temperature at which the oxygen is ejected. You can see the highest nickel is about 220 degrees. The low nickel is about 320. You may say we never get to those temperatures in a real battery, but this is a direct measure of how reactive these materials are with the electrolyte. So the higher the nickel goes, the more reactive they are. So we have to solve that problem and basically get them to last forever with the highest nickel content we can get if we're going to use these layered oxides. And the figure on the left just shows you the same plot. It's the nickel content, not the charging voltage or any other composition. It's the nickel content that drives this. So the other issue we have, you've got to use all the lithium in the material. All these layered oxides lose about 15% on the very first cycle. So if you can take all the lithium out with no problem, but you try to put all the lithium back in, the last 15% of that lithium is incredibly difficult to get back in, and it's the same issue here. I think if I look around here, there's a couple of empty seats here, there's another empty seat over there. This is what these lithium ions, how do we get to these empty seats? So basically everybody has to move to get the last 20 or 30% in there. And that's the challenge. So we lose about 2 orders of magnitude in diffusion coefficient for the last 20%. So we're trying to work to solve that, and this is means modifying the materials in various ways. And I just show you one way we've used here is to put niobium coatings or niobium substituents in these materials. And here's a plot that shows you just by putting a few percent, 1% niobium in there, you can cut this first cycle loss by essentially 50%. You don't need a lot. It turns out it's much more complex than you would think. You put the niobium on the surface, a certain amount diffuses in, it kicks out an equivalent amount of manganese, so your surface coating is in fact a niobium manganese oxide. What we also found, now if you put the niobium so it goes totally within the lattice, it really stabilizes that lattice. It stops the oxygen from moving, so it stops that surface reactivity. And here's a case where we put, I think in this case, from 1 to 4% niobium in there. With niobium inside this lattice, these materials don't lose any capacity at all. So after 200 cycles, we still have 99.7% of the original capacity. So we can stabilize this materials. Niobium isn't necessarily the best material to use. You can see if you look closely at that little plot there, they are losing capacity. So the actual absolute capacity is reduced, but the capacity retention is great. And this is believed to be this, it reduces the cracking of those meatballs. And you can see on the left-hand side here, this is untreated material, large cracks, and the treated material, much smaller cracks, and therefore less electrolyte penetration. So we're stabilizing that lattice. So let me talk briefly about, I said, no, if we're going to use phosphates, and I'm a champion of phosphates, they're much more stable than oxides. We've got to put 2 lithiums in there, and we can do that by using vanadium 5 to 4 to 3. We tried it with iron, and I think Dr. Yamada talked about that this morning in the battery session. If you're doing it with iron, you've got to go to 5.5 to 6 volts, and the electrolytes are not stable. So we make this tunnel structure, and by simple hydrothermal techniques, and I may emphasize a bit towards the end, big challenge in batteries today is the cost of manufacturing the materials. They use batch processing, high temperatures. Here we're using a hydrothermal approach, 200 degrees centigrade. That's the waste stream of any refinery or chemical plant, so it costs you nothing in energy. We then give it a heat treatment. We get all those protons out we put in there, and I'll just show you some of the data. There's the little crystallites we make. They're about 100 to 200 nanometers in size. And you can see we can get in 1 lithium at 4 volt. The second lithium goes in at about 2.5 volts. And the black curve there is the first cycle. And the purple curve is the 50th cycle. If you look closely, the 50th cycle is better than the first cycle. So we had proof of concept. You can, in fact, stuff 2 lithium ions into a crystalline lattice without that lattice falling apart. So we're still working on this. There's some issues. These are great oxidation catalysts, so they like reacting with the solvents. So let me talk a little bit, and this is getting away from the science into more some political and other issues. And I want to acknowledge Michel Amand. He just became a fellow. And Michel really pioneered polymeric electrolytes for batteries. Now, he's been a champion of it, and nobody has really beaten his materials in the last 40 years. People have tried to make them better, they haven't. So there were a number of efforts in this country. It didn't work out, and Bolloré in France basically licensed the technology, and you can rent these little blue cars in a number of cities, both in this country and in Europe. You rent them by the hour, and they seem to work well. The challenge is they work at about 70 degrees centigrade, the batteries. Okay? So these work very well, but more recently, they've been trying to push the limits of these materials, making bigger and bigger cells. And this is one issue as of about this time last year. Mercedes have these buses. They switched some of them over to all solid-state batteries, and sometime in October last year, one of them caught fire overnight. It burnt down the garage and burnt down 25 other buses. And they haven't given the cause of this fire yet, but the suggestion is on charging, the lithium metal actually melted. So it got very much overheated. There's a real problem there, but we're still waiting to find out really what the issue was. This year, these buses are now made by Bolloré themselves. 2 buses caught fire in Paris in April whilst being used, but everybody got out safely, but they pulled all these buses off the market. So there are still some issues on the safety of some of these very large battery systems. And I want to emphasize that we're storing energy. Every energy source is inherently dangerous. And if I stand on the edge of the stage here, I fall down, right? If I'm not careful. So whether it's kinetic energy, potential energy, or you've got gasoline fires, it's inherently dangerous. So we have to make batteries that are safe. So I've shown you the 2 buses. I've shown you here a picture of an Indian scooter made with, they believe, very cheap bad batteries that caught fire. You all know about the 787, again, bad battery design. Samsung phones, bad battery design. But just to make the point, don't think it's just battery cars that catch fire. At the bottom there, I've shown you a picture. No. Over here. This is a very nice $110,000, $120,000 Nissan sports car. Caught fire. If you looked at the 2, you wouldn't tell the difference. It's an electric vehicle and internal combustion engine. The Tesla that caught fire there was, again, a design area. They didn't have a skid plate underneath the Teslas. They do now, so they can't penetrate metal from underneath. The Nissan car parked on top of some dry leaves. We all know catalytic converters get rather hot underneath, so that burnt up that car. And all the battery fires can't be blamed on the battery. So this is a Tesla facility in, I think, South Australia, and they had a coolant leak inside it. So it's electronics and other things we have to worry about, not just the battery itself. So my second point I want to make, and I give you a few examples, and we all know what happened when COVID came. Where do you get your masks from, if you could get them? There's a real issue. We've got a real issue with semiconductors. Germany has a real issue with natural gas. These global supply chains where any one region in the world controls, let's say, 90% of any bit of the supply chain are not tenable. And I think everyone's agreed that we have to change it, both for security and sustainability. So some components in a lithium battery, it is said, travel 50,000 miles from the mine to the finished product. They go around the world a couple of times, which is crazy. No, we have to solve that. We have, as electrochemists, we have to find a way of eliminating the critical elements. Cobalt basically has to go, and I think some folks would say nickel eventually has to go. But no, the US started a cobalt mine, officially started producing, I think, about 10 days ago in Idaho. They mine that material, then it gets either shipped to Brazil or to Finland to be processed. Nuts, no. And I'll just jump down a few lines. The reason for that is it's impossible to get permits in this country in a reasonable time frame. So those Americans who saw that a senator from West Virginia couldn't get his bill through Congress, that bill had a huge amount of green energy stuff in there, both solar, wind, electrical utilities. It got basically wiped out because it had a bit of coal in there as well. So we have to get the permitting. So if you want to open a new mine in the United States, it probably takes you 20 years, by which time we've lost the business. We should be able to get graphite and other metals locally, And when I talk about locally, and I think I've convinced DOE that now stop talking about US supply chain. At minimum, it's North America, because our colleagues up north have a lot of clean hydropower, they have a lot of nickel, they have some graphite up there. We have to work closely with Canada. We are in a position where we should be able to make our own supply chain. So we all know the universities here are great at chemistry IP. Almost all the chemistry IP of every battery you can think of is either American or British. And I mention British because John Goodenough was in Britain when he invented lithium cobalt oxide. Okay. So chemistry is mostly Western. We have the startups who can push the technology, but I think they are being somewhat disastrous for this field at the moment. They are so overhyping what they've got that people are not believing their reports anymore. So they're getting huge investments, and they need to produce and send their batteries or whatever product they have to a third party to really evaluate and prove that what they have is real. But the real problem we have no means in this country of prototyping batteries, and we don't have equipment manufacturers to make batteries. That has to be solved. That's all changing right now. There's going to be some big awards made, and we're told in about a couple of weeks by DOE, billions of dollars to help manufacturing. And I want to talk about a little project we now have, and that's Battery New York. So we just received a big award, and I'll show you some numbers in a moment. This really demonstrates what the issue is. In North America, it's the same issue in Europe. We have lots of smart people. We can do the chemistry, we can build a few cells, but we can't make, say, 1,000 cells for somebody to test. So the technology gets shipped to Asia, and then basically Asia then makes the batteries and ships them back to us. So what we proposed is this facility called Battery New York, where we're going to build a prototyping facility there with new manufacturing methods. So we want to leapfrog what's been going on in Asia. Remember, battery manufacturing is 30 to 40 years old now. It's very similar to what it was back in the 1990s. We should be able to do better than that, and our goal is to do that. This facility will make full-size pouch and cylindrical cells so people can evaluate real cells, and it will allow commercial manufacturing. And I mentioned southern tier of New York because New York's putting a lot of money into this as well. So this is what this project is. It's called New Energy New York. Battery New York is part of it. We've got $113 million from the Economic Development Agency and from New York State. Most of that money is in the first 3 years, but the Battery New York part is 10 years. So the goal here is to build the facility, to develop a supply chain, and that means Northern American suppliers, and I think the federal government has earmarked a few other countries which are super friendly and have what we want, namely Australia, I think, is in the situation here. So we're going to get the supply chain, and New York Best is working on that. The biggest issue, we've talked to maybe 50 to 100 companies throughout the Northeast, no workers. There's no one who knows how to make a battery. There's no power electrical engineers. So you want to make a battery and connect it to a solar facility or design the electronics. There's very few of those folks. So we've got, I think, $12 million to build a workforce development program to start training these people. Clearly, the other big issue these days in this country is justice, diversity. The facility we're building is in Endicott, New York. Probably not many of you have been there. That was the original home of IBM. That's where they started out. When I went there 30 years ago, they had probably 10,000 engineers there. Today, they have maybe 100 financial folks, but that's it. So we got all the empty facilities, so the plan is to redevelop that region, and we collaborate with also Rochester, New York, where Kodak's in the battery business, and we have some other testing facilities. And there's a big effort in startups, which we call acceleration. If we want to have next generation batteries and next generation manufacturing, then we need these startups, whether they're little companies or big companies like Applied Materials. We need to get these folks involved in this whole system. So I think I've mentioned most of what we're doing in the battery in Europe, part of that. It'll be open to any technology within reason, okay? You can ask me about that later. The main thrust of that is to encourage American manufacturers of equipment, okay? The second one is to develop new manufacturing techniques, and I think this came up in some talks today in the battery division. Most battery materials are made by batch processes. One pot, ceramic pot, heat it, next one. We've got to have continuous processing, so we need chemical engineers and electrochemists involved in that. This will let us leapfrog the present technology. Our goal is to also eliminate all these organic chemicals. So we need help from electrochemists to show how we can coat electrodes without using things like NMP, which I understand is about to get banned in Europe because of its toxic nature. And we're going to be looking at UV systems to actually do that. I said we're building a demonstration scale, so it'll be about 30 megawatt hours, much smaller than the British BIC, but we think this is a realistic size which we can run in an economically viable manner. And all this is going to require electrochemistry and electrochemists. So let me just finish by a few comments. I know there's people working on other things besides lithium batteries, but we believe lithium battery systems are going to dominate for the next 5 to 10 years. It takes at least that long for a new technology to get in place, and the challenge for any new technology to get a foothold is got to be lower cost than today's technology when you're making billions of batteries a year. We need new manufacturing technologies, I've mentioned that. But what we need, and the environmentalists are pushing this very much, we need clean mining technology with clean energy. So some of you may have looked at how much energy it takes, how much water it takes to generate lithium for the batteries. It's huge. That has to change. And we should better use electroreduction techniques for the metals rather than carbothermal techniques. And there again, this is a new business for all you electrochemists. Let's go back and look at that. And we're trying to push the feds to put more money into that area. No, right now I think there's probably too much money in battery science, maybe too much money in hydrogen. No, unless some of you got great ideas for hydrogen, but it's not clear that, no, we're talking about billions of dollars. And we need new clean recycling technologies. Again, we're fortunate in New York State, Lithium Cycle. Their major site is in Rochester, New York. They're a Canadian company, but that's their hub, so they're a major lithium battery recycling effort, and that's expanding throughout the States. I mentioned we need clean hydrogen production. There's no point in anybody saying, I can make hydrogen. But if it's dirty, made from coal or something else, there's no point in it. And the first hydrogen production from a nuclear power plant was announced about a week ago, and that's happening in Oswego, New York. There's 3 nuclear power plants there, and they're going to generate hydrogen. They didn't disclose exactly how, but no, that's up and running now. But basically, we need regional supply chains. This is both cost and security. We've got to work closer with Canada, and I think everybody's agreeing with that these days. And as Senator Schumer says, he visited us a few weeks ago, we've got to be able to have batteries, and sorry to you folks from other parts of the world, but we want batteries that say stamped on them, made in America by Americans. Okay? We've got to be more secure there. And in the end, we've got to build a clean ecosystem for this country. We've got to get away from all these dirty fuels. And I didn't mention, probably should have done, solar and wind are now much lower cost than coal power plants. All we need to go is look at the Texas plans from their utilities. 95% of all their generation capacity planned for the last 2 years and the next 5 years is all renewable. And that's just driven by straight economics. And I will stop there, and I think my boss in the audience here is going to come and grill me now.
Thank you, Stan, for this remarkable and very inspiring talk. We thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Jay Shah, ECS Battery Division Secretary and Battelle Fellow of the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, to moderate a very special question and answer dialogue with Professor Whittingham.
Thank you. Thank you, Taggart. And thank you, Stan, for that outstanding talk. So, can you hear me in the back? How about now? Still no? Hello? Can you hear me now? No. I take it as a yes. Okay. Hello? So if you have a question for Professor Whittingham, please use the microphones located in the aisles. Virtual attendees, you may want to submit your questions online by using questions feature in Zoom. But first, I have a question for Professor Whittingham. So the niobium doping is really very, very interesting, which significantly reduced the capacity loss. So do you think if we wash the niobium dope, the NMC, that can probably even further increase the usable capacity? Because you mentioned
Yes.
you did not get rid of the lithium carbonate.
Right. So depending on how we treat the 80% and higher nickel materials are all extremely reactive with the environment. So they invariably have lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate. We can remove the carbonate if we treat them with lithium-free niobium precursors. That'll then take that lithium and evolve it. But we're still working on that. Ideally, I think we'd like to find something a little less expensive than niobium to do this. So we're working on that right now.
Thank you. I saw someone already standing over there.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very... Oh, is this better? Okay, yeah, first of all, Professor Whittingham, thank you for the presentation. My question is about grid infrastructure. So there's a lot of, I guess, focus on your talk about we have to modernize the grid and make it more clean. But there's also been a lot of talks about creating a new DC infrastructure, having small, resilient grids, and just moving away from the existing AC infrastructures. I just want to hear your opinions on that and whether that should be a priority thrust in future development as well.
So I think there's a lot of interest in this country to reinforce the grid. One way of doing that is to have microgrids, mini grids. So you may have in a housing development, you'd have your own grid, your own storage, connected still to the main grid. But the main grid is so old now, and there are some states that are stubborn and belong to the grid. And I think Texas is separate from everybody else, and you saw what happened a couple of years ago when they had the freeze. They had a real problem. So I think there's a real need to modernize the grid and maybe look at the optimization of AC versus DC. This was a big fight. When was it? 150 years ago as to what direction to go, and it probably needs revisiting.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Next one.
Thank you for the fantastic talk. But I have a question about lithium. Now, even though it's so important today, but when you look at the periodic table, I think we should look at carbon. You must have been thinking about this. Why can't we have a carbon battery instead?
Yeah, let me rephrase the question. So I think the audience was asking, why not carbon, right? Why not carbon batteries, right? Is that, yeah, carbon.
We looked at carbon a long time ago. We looked at ideas like having potassium bromide or lithium bromide, electrolyte, 2 carbon electrodes, electrolyze it, put the alkali in one and the anion in the other one. They're not very good volumetrically. And there's an issue these days also with carbon on lifetime. So we can switch chemistries, but in the end you come back to the same thing. How do you make something last, what utilities want, 20 years, cycling every day? That's tough no matter what. So we have to look at all the materials, and just switching the chemistries won't necessarily make it easier.
Before you start, please let Professor Whittingham drink some water. And I'm going to ask a long technical question. So I recall when I was a graduate student, he always encouraged me and other students to attend the professional society meetings such as the ECS, which I feel really benefited my career a lot. So today, for the students and the scientists, especially the young scientists in this room, do you have any advice or comment about how they can take a better advantage of this platform or opportunities provided by professional societies such as the ECS? Because there are so many topics, so many activities, and so many dinners as well. So how can we become better engaged and contribute to our scientific community? Thank you.
Yes, so I think students and younger folks, you've got to do something that excites you. Whatever you do, don't do it for the money. And we had a famous example, I don't know whether Jay remembers it, we had a graduate student we made an offer to. His parents wanted him to go to med school. So he went to med school in September, called us up at the end of October, said, is this graduate student offer still open? So we took him in. He's a great teacher. He's in the community college. That's what he wanted to do, and he's doing it. So the main thing is to enjoy yourself. But you need to come to meetings of this sort. And some meetings are smaller and easier to interact. But you meet your colleagues. And I wish most of the talks at these meetings were shorter, so you get to have a longer Q&A session, so both the students and senior folks could interact. I remember back in the old days, you get 2 of the key people in the field would argue with each other in the Q&A session. And I think that's very good for the students because they understand, hey, everybody doesn't agree on this. There's more than one solution. But I think it's critical that students involve themselves in this. And Jay knows I'm part of the Battery 500 Consortium. My students give the talks there. I don't give the talks because I think it's more important for them to get involved with everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chris, did you get a point? Next one.
Good evening, Professor. Actually, I was following your very old research work based on tantalum sulfide. So I read the very old report of yours, and you mentioned that the tantalum sulfide was a kind of very good cathode at that time. But I tried to work on the tantalum sulfide cathodes, but I wanted to know that what was the exact reason for the failure of tantalum sulfide cathodes? Thank you.
There was no technical failure in titanium sulfide and those materials. The problem is they're 2.5 volts. And if you put them against a graphite anode, then you lose another 1/3 of a volt. So when John Goodenough came up with the cobalt oxide, essentially same structure, it's 4 volts. That penalty of the graphite isn't so bad. But in the end, it turned out the initial lithium cobalt oxide cells had exactly the same energy density as the titanium disulfide. Because on the cobalt oxide, you have to put carbon in the cathode. Titanium disulfide is a metallic conductor, so you don't need any of that. But in the end, The lithium field, you want higher and higher voltages, and the sulfides did not do that. But my understanding is some of the folks working on lithium sulfur batteries are now putting things like titanium disulfide in the cathode because it's a good conductor and it can interact well with the sulfur.
Thank you so much.
Next one.
Hi, thank you for your talk. Your call to action was we need more fundamental electrochemistry, and I think as a fundamental chemist, I think most of us are here and ready for the call. However, it feels like so often we're told we don't see the application, so we're not going to fund you, or we're not going to. There's so often that is the issue we fundamentalists are afflicted with, and I was curious if you had any further thoughts on that. I think it's something we need to talk about as scientists. So, thank you.
Do you want to paraphrase that?
So let me rephrase her question to make sure I understand your question correctly. So you are talking about sometimes academic research is very fundamental, right? We cannot see immediate application, so it's very hard for some of the researchers to get funding to continue their research. Yeah, so she's asking if you have any comment on that.
If you just want to elaborate, or if it's too sensitive, I understand.
What's that?
Yeah, she's asking.
Yes. So I think today, I don't want to say there's excessive amount of funding in Washington, but it's approaching that level. So my philosophy has always been, do fundamental research, but it's got to have a focus. At the end of the tunnel, there's got to be something there that you're targeting at. Don't do it for its own sake. But if you want to look at, say, lithium batteries, there's no problem looking at sodium, potassium, magnesium to understand the lithium battery better. And a pet peeve of mine is magnesium batteries are not going to work. So don't please sell them as batteries. Use them to explain and understand better how ions diffuse, how they react on the surface, and so on. We've got to do the fundamental work, but we have to be realistic and not oversell things. So some of you will remember DOE had two big studies, one in, I'm going to say about 2011 or something, and another one 8 or 10 years later on what research should be done in batteries. In the first one, there was absolutely no mention of lithium air batteries. In the second one, there was no mention of lithium air batteries. They came and went in that period when people really looked at them and said, they're probably not going to work, there's too many challenges. So, you have to do fundamental research, but make sure it's targeted, answering a real question. Don't tell a funding agency, I want to do that because I like doing that. There's got to be some rationale. And right now, as I said, there's lots and lots of money in Washington.
Thank you.
And you can always collaborate, right, with people who are making devices to validate the fundamental concept.
Yes. So Jay brought up an important point. When I started out in this business, almost all the grants were single investigator grants. That has changed dramatically. So most of the awards now are group awards like Battery 500 or like the EFRC that I used to run. So you team up, and basically DOE says, we want an experimentalist, we want a theorist, and maybe somebody else, but they want you to have all the strengths on your team. Don't try to do it all by yourself.
Yeah,
Maybe we have time for one last question.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your talk. It was great. I would not like to sound provoking, but just be aware that I'm not trying to be provoking to your field, but also to my field, because I work with the sustainable recovery of metals, and specifically lithium, right? So you mentioned about replacing critical materials, and you made emphasis on cobalt, but in fact, lithium is also a critical material. So what's your opinion about actually replacing lithium?
About the emphasis on lithium.
So you're asking, what about the lithium? Because lithium is also a critical material.
It's a critical
material. I think lithium is emerging to be a critical material, but not yet, if my understanding is correct.
So the issue with lithium, there's plenty of lithium in the world. But if you're going to use, for example, the evaporation ponds in South America, from where you put the first liquid in those, it's 2 years before you get lithium out. So we've got a supply chain issue at the moment. Australia makes lithium from spodumene. They're opening up, don't want to say a mine a day, but there's a huge amount of lithium out there. It's a matter of getting it out, and it takes time. You can't just turn the spigot on and off overnight.
Thank you. Since he's standing there for quite a while, this is really the last question.
Sorry, I'll keep it quick. Thank you for the talk, Professor. My question is, with programs like the Battery New York that you mentioned, are you concerned that the increased manufacturing will generate more battery waste?
The answer is every manufacturing facility generates about 10% waste. This is, in a sense, good waste because the material hasn't been used. So there's a gigafactory just started operation, also in Endicott. Their material will probably go to Rochester, and this is what the recycling facility is like. It's pure material, they can recycle it almost straight back into the factory. It's not got all crud and dirt and stuff on it. But that's one of the things in the, as we, leapfrog what's been done. We've got to get that 85 to 95% up to, 85 to 90% up to 95% and not have so much wastage.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have time for. And thanks again, Stan, for sharing your research with the ECS community. Thank you.
Well, Stan, it is my honor, and and for everybody here I speak for, thank you so much for being here. I know a couple of years ago we were here in this room right after you became a laureate, and this is a great way to book it.
3 years ago.
Yes, 3 years ago it was. So it is my honor to present you with this scroll in appreciation of the wonderful talk today. And as we are playing catch up and presenting past awards given during this shutdown, on behalf of all of ECS, Stan, it is my pleasure to present you with this scroll commemorating your elevation to honorary member of ECS in 2020. You had a good couple of years there with awards, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. This is celebrating the incredible achievements of your career and over 50 years of ECS membership. Stan, really, we are proud that you stand among us and that you stand with us here today. Thank you so much. Congratulations. And all the best to you, sir.
Thank you.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh. It is really great to be back here doing conferences again. So thank you to everyone for participating in today's ECS Awards ceremony and plenary lecture with Professor Stan Whittingham. Before we wrap, I should mention that the 243rd ECS meeting and the 18th Solid Oxide Fuel Cell Conference will be held jointly in Boston, Massachusetts from May 28th to June 2nd in 2023. The abstract submission for that conference is currently open. The deadline is December 2nd, so please get your abstract submitted promptly. And on the screen, you can see some other future meeting dates that we've got listed, so please be sure to mark your calendars for those. Most importantly, the exhibit floor is now open just across the hall in the Grand Ballroom, so join us as we open the technical exhibition and the first general poster session. So please make it a point to visit with our exhibit while you browse the posters. We know those exhibitors are very eager to see you and they're standing by, so that'll be right across the hall there. And with that, this concludes the ECS Awards and Recognition Ceremony and the ECS Plenary with Stan Whittingham. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Atlanta. Have a fantastic week. Thank you.